Hey, welcome to John chapter 8. Hey everybody, welcome to Bible Time. We are picking up in John chapter 8. We just got done reading about the section that apparently wasn't in the earliest versions, but it's so good. And I think it's such a part of church history. It represents Jesus' heart so well. The woman caught in adultery, and he says, "Has anybody condemned you? Neither then do I. Go and sin no more." And we're going to pick up in verse 12. Welcome to Bible Time if you're new and you don't know what this is. You just came across this. This is simply us reading the Bible together. I try to post one video a day, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. But my goal is to help every person to read the Bible every day. And even if just a short time, even if this way, I want to get your eyes in front of the Word. The statistics say that if we read the Bible at least 4 times a week, we are going to be healthier people. And I think that it's spiritual food for us, along with prayer and listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit. And so, as with everything that is in the spiritual world, it's not for legalism's sake or just for religion. It's that we would grow in our relationship with Jesus and grow in our obedience to Him. So we're going to jump in here. We're just going to start reading. I encourage you to spend some time in prayer on your own after this. Here we go. John chapter 8 verse 12 says this, "Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Right here at the beginning, we have to just stop and just underline, squiggly line a few things. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now this right here, the light of life and the light of the world, both remind me of John chapter 1, where he begins to talk about who Jesus was and how he was the light that came into the world, and the world did not recognize him or receive him. But secondly, this is the second I am statement that we see. And so he's not just talking about light, he's making a declarative statement about who he is. I am. And this is the second time that we've seen this. And so I'm going to make a note of that. This time, if you notice, or if you remember, the first time we saw it was up here in John chapter, where is that? John chapter 6. He says, I am the bread of life. If gluten was so bad, why would Jesus call himself the bread of life? Anyway, moving on. That's the first one. We're going to see 7 I am statements in the Gospel of John. And as irony would have it, or providence, or maybe it doesn't matter, there's also 7 miracles in the Gospel of John. But the first thing that Jesus says, declarative statement about who he is, I am the bread of life. And he's talking all about how he came to feed us with true substance. And then here we find ourselves in chapter 8. I am the light of the world. Beautiful. Second I am statement. I am the light of the world. Verse 13. So the Pharisees said to him, you are bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true. Jesus answered, even if I do bear witness about myself, my testimony is true. For I know where I came from and where I'm going. But you do not know where I come from or where I'm going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Yet, even if I do judge, my judgment is true. For it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it's written that the testimony of 2 people is true. I am the one who bears witness about myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness about me. They said to him, therefore, where is your Father? Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. These words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come. We see that for the second time, or maybe third time, specifically stating that his hour had not come. That is, the time for him to go to death had not arrived. Okay, let's continue. Verse 21, so he said to them, I am going away, and you will seek me, and you will die in your sin. Wow. That's pretty blunt. Where I'm going, you cannot come. So the Jews said, will he kill himself, since he says, where I'm going, you cannot come? I'm personally confused as to why that would be their conclusion. If I said to you, hey, I'm going somewhere and you're not allowed to come, would your first assumption be that I'm going to commit suicide? I don't know. Maybe there's something more to that that I'm missing, but to me that just strikes me as a little weird. But anyway, he said to them, you are from below, and I'm from above. Yeah, you're from hell and I'm from heaven. I don't know if that's explicitly what he meant, but seems like he's kind of calling them out. You are of this world, and I am not of this world. So maybe he just meant below as in this world, and I'm from above as in the kingdom of heaven. I told you that you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am he, you will die in your sins. So they said to him, who are you? And Jesus said to them, just as I've been telling you from the beginning. This actually is an extremely important question to me. Who are you? I don't know if there's anybody out there watching this who doesn't feel like they already know the answer to that question. But if you happened across this video somehow and you're still watching and you don't know who Jesus is, I would submit to you that that might be the most important question you ever ask, is who is he? I think the question is it's deeper than it just seems on the surface. So often when I talk to people about Jesus, like if I'm on the streets and I ask people, who do you think Jesus is? Oftentimes their answer is about church, or how they've been hurt in church, or religion, how they're not a religious person, and it's all these things that aren't actually about the person of Jesus himself, the historical figure of Jesus the Christ, the man who historically lived 2,000 years ago. They answer all these questions about church or religion or a political issue that they don't, they think Christians believe something about, all these crazy answers. And I always say to them, hey, I get it, and but I'm not asking you about church. I'm not asking you about your grandma's religion. I'm not asking you about politics or Donald Trump or whatever. I'm asking you, who do you really think Jesus is? Because it's the most important question. His identity and what we believe about him says everything about what we believe about ourselves, this world, where we're going, what our purpose is. And so if you don't yet know the answer to that, or maybe a majority of the people that are watching this, you probably do know the answer to that, and that's why you're watching this. And so I just would encourage you, maybe as you're talking to people, to ask questions that way and get to the heart of the issue, which is what they believe about the person of Jesus, not what they believe about religion or church or all the stuff. That's the place to start, at least, in my opinion. Let's move on. Who are you? Jesus said, just as I've been telling you from the beginning. Verse 26, I have much to say about you and much to judge, but he who sent me is true, and I declare to the world that I have heard from him. They did not understand that he had been speaking to them about the Father. So Jesus said to them, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me. I assume when he says, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, this is always, him referring to himself, but lifted up as in the cross, I assume, is what he's referring to. Lifted him up to the cross. And he who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do the things that are pleasing to him. As he was saying these things, many believed in him. Beautiful. So Jesus said to the Jews who believed in him. Interesting that it's noting that it's specifically him speaking to the ones that had believed in him. Now, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham, and we have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? Now, there's a few things we need to stop here and just look at. So he's talking to the Jews that are questioning him, many of them obviously disagreeing with him. It says, though, that while he was speaking, many believed in him. And then it specifically points out that Jesus then speaks to those Jews who had believed in him. And he begins to talk about abiding in him, staying in him, sticking in the belief. So he says, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And this word abide, there's something like, from what I remember from my studies in Greek, it's like not just two Lego pieces, that have the little, one on the top has the ridges and then the other on the bottom has the holes, and it kind of sticks together. It's like so much deeper than just kind of like stick together, hang on to one another, but it can break apart. But it's more like the Lego pieces get the plastic is melted and they're stuck together and they just remain there and they can no longer come apart. That's more what the word, I think, insinuates, is that he's asking us to join together with him. Kind of like when my wife and I got married and we, some people do the candle, or there's all kinds of cool things you do. What we did back in the day was popular, like to each pour a color of sand in, and the sand would mix together, and there's a gazillion little sand particles in it, but it's different colors. But the idea is there's no way you could get them all separated. And that's, I think, what Jesus is kind of insinuating is this like binding together of choosing to, through our belief, actually remain and abide in him, and specifically his word. It says, if you abide in my word, that is, everything that he is speaking, for he doesn't speak on his own behalf, he speaks on behalf of the Father. If you abide in me, then you are my disciples. So he's drawing this sort of difference between belief and abiding, equaling being a disciple. So you can begin to believe, but it doesn't mean that you abide. And what he's saying is you need to abide in order to be a disciple. And so I just think that that's an important thing for us all to remember. It's an important thing, just a reminder for today. It's a takeaway. But at any given time, I think that we need to remember it's not just believing academically that Jesus existed at some point in time, but it's abiding. It's inserting our life in his word, into his living word, into his heart, into all that he says, that our life would remain in him, so that our belief, our intellectual, academic belief translates into all that we are in him, and then that we would follow him as a disciple. So they're like, hey, what do you mean, like, we will be free? Oh, yeah, not to mention the next thing he says, and then you will know the truth. So if you believe and abide in his word, you will be his disciple. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so let's just point it out here. We got belief, which is number one. Number two, he says, take your belief into abiding, and that will make you, number three, a disciple. And then you will know the truth. Isn't it interesting that belief has to do with truth, but he's talking about another level of truth? Then you'll know the truth, and the truth will then set you free. So number 4 is knowing the truth. Number 5 is being set free. Believe, abide, be a disciple, know the truth, and be set free. Now let's just finish this and then let's jump back into those takeaways. They're like, hey, we've never been a slave to anyone. We're the children of Abraham. It's interesting because one of the most significant things about the history of Israel is that they were slaves in Egypt, but these people, they weren't. So they're like, hey, we've never been slaves. How do we need to become free? And Jesus answered them, truly, truly, this statement that he says when he wants to emphasize something, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. Man, I just want to get I want to get done with this video, but this is just too good to just speed through. This is Jesus, the Son of God. We need to stop and pause when we hear something like this. It's so easy for us to just read over it. Everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. What is it that we are practicing? That is, not just making mistakes, not just stumbling, not just accidentally, but practicing. Like, what is it that we're giving ourselves over to consciously? If we do that, we're a slave. If we practice, we're a slave. And so he's beginning to point out to them that when he talks about them being free versus being a slave, he's not talking about to another person in this, you're not a physical slave to Pharaoh in Egypt. But he's beginning to show that his purpose here was not just to bring a physical change on this planet, but a spiritual change. That we have all become slaves to this thing called sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains forever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I've seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. Presumably, the devil is what I think he's insinuating and what he's going to talk about next. So, I think this would be my takeaway today. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. That we need him to see in the darkness, to overcome the darkness. And then he gets down in here and he's speaking to those that believed. And he's encouraging them not just to believe, but to abide in his word. And if you do that, you will be a disciple. And the next step is that if you're a disciple who's abiding and believing, that you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Free from what? Free from sin. Free from slavery. Free from this world. Free to follow Jesus in the fullness of life that he offered us. So, those are my takeaways today. I don't know what yours are, but if you got something, if you're hearing something from the Lord, I'd love to hear from you. Had some people begin to send me messages and reach out, and whether it's something that they're studying or whatever. And so I always appreciate that. Share a comment. If you are watching this on YouTube and you like it, I just invite you to subscribe. If you're watching this anywhere else and you can think of somebody in your world that might benefit from these videos, I just want to encourage you to send it to them, tag them, share it somehow. I just, my heart in these is, this is nothing super significant. I get it. This is not a sermon, a teaching series. This is just us reading the Bible together. And my goal is just to help people that maybe normally wouldn't spend time reading the Bible to read the Bible. And so if you know anybody like that, please share it with them. I'd love to, for this to just encourage and bless as many people as possible. So that being said, I bid you a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.